Hello, everyone, and welcome to what is technically called Episode 5 of the Rewatch podcast presented by the Terrible Video Gamers Club. I'm the host for the episode, Tyler Schatz, sworn brother of the Night's Watch. What we're kind of doing here is, even though this is technically Episode 5 of our podcast here, we're kind of doing like a soft relaunch, reboot, whatever you want to call it, of the show here, where we're going to kind of go through, watch the Game of Thrones show, and have just some brief discussions on it with some friends here after every episode, after every set of episodes gets kind of watched there. So joining me here is Mr. Gary Delaney from the last chunks of episodes we watched.
Great Bear.
I couldn't quite hear you there, Gary, and they can't see you waving either.
The Great Bear of the North.
Gary the Great Bear of the North. Okay. And joining us for the first time here is the Howards, Stephen and Amanda Howard. I'll throw it over to Stephen there.
Nice to be here.
Happy to have you, Stephen. And Amanda?
Also, it's nice to be here.
Thanks for joining us. So to kind of get us started here a little bit here too, and just kind of a little bit of a relaunch for everyone listening here, we'll kind of go through and just kind of talk about our history with Game of Thrones, Song of Ice and Fire, that kind of whole thing there. Just kind of where we were when we kind of discovered what is the Game of Thrones show. And I'll kind of kick it off. I believe I was introduced to it around season 3 or season 4. I can't remember which. And I was kind of told, hey, you should watch this show. You might really like it. It's like Lord of the Rings, but more mature and adult themed and stuff like that. And I was like, okay. And I just happened to be living with a roommate at the time who had an HBO Go account, and he left for one weekend. So I sat down and binge watched the entire show and went, yep, this is a pretty good show. So, and then too, I've also, I've spent some time reading the books. I'm currently reading right now, The Dance with Dragons, or A Dance with Dragons. And I finished up Feast for Crows earlier this year, but then too, I've read the other books, but it has been a long, long time since I've read those books. So my history is a little foggy when it comes to those books. We'll throw it over to Gary now.
I probably jumped in about season 3 or season 4, back before HBO Go or HBO Max existed. So just had to try to find the episodes on the internet, and then been a fan ever since. I have never actually read any books. I'm illiterate, but I have audiobooked through the first whole book and part of the second one, and fell asleep because it's rather dry the way it's written, and somebody's reading it to you.
All right, Steven, you're up next, sir.
So I learned about these books about the first season that the show came out, and I learned about them. You heard everyone was kind of going, "Oh, this is a really good TV show going on. You should give it a shot." And I'm like, "Oh, maybe." And I'd happen to have a friend that had read all the books, and I went to Brost in Brookings, which is a small little game shop, but they also have a bunch of books in there. And I'm walking through Brost's looking for I don't know what, and I come upon the first book of Game of Thrones, and I'm like, oh, this is the thing that everyone's been talking about. Should I get this? I'm talking to my friend, and he looks at me and goes, "You haven't read this yet? Who even are you? What are you doing here? Of course you're going to get that." And that's how I was bullied into getting the first book of Game of Thrones, and I was hooked on that. I was unprepared for the tribulations that the show and the book series would take me on, but it was that's how I was bullied into the show, the TV show, and the book series.
All right. Amanda, we'll throw it over to you.
I had remembered hearing about the show, wasn't really interested or whatever, but it was actually Stephen who got me into it because he was telling me this is such a great book series, it's a great show, you should watch it. And I actually remember standing in Best Buy of all places, and Stephen was staring at the TVs over and being like, "It's really cool that you can like tell who everyone is on that show when you haven't even like watched it yet." And I do remember seeing one of the scenes on there, so I'm pretty sure it was at least season 2. He did tell me early on that everything I knew and loved would die.
And I was right.
I didn't realize how right he would be. I was like, okay, I'm sure there's going to be some deaths. But he forced me to watch one of the first episodes, or the very first episode, and that's what actually got me hooked because it just sucked you right in. So after that, I started reading the books, and then I ended up surpassing where Stephen was reading the books because I don't know why. Maybe I read faster. But he hid the next book on me, which is a mistake because I tore the place apart thinking I would find that book because he told me he was going to hide it. How good can he be at hiding a book? Yep, I couldn't find it, so I bought it on Kindle because I wasn't waiting for him to come home from work to give me a book. And I've read the books through a few times, but it's been several years because you kind of got to take a break between them. It's just emotionally taxing. Probably about time to reread them.
I would recommend it, as I'm currently reading through A Dance with Dragons right now, going, wow, this is pretty good so far.
Actually, now that all the seasons have come out, I kind of want to go back and reread it with fresh eyes, knowing what I do now.
Yes, exactly. Kind of seeing if you can kind of piece together where he is trying to head in the book compared to where the show kind of took everything.
Making it up as he goes along.
Exactly. He's had no clue this entire time. He's just been like, yeah, whatever.
That's what he's been doing this entire time when he's been stranded on wherever the heck he is, not writing any books. He's been sitting there going, should I? Nah. Should I, though? Nah.
I remember Stephen telling me early on, and I've actually read this a few other places, that some of the inspiration for it came from England's history, the War of the Roses, and that was a time period that I absolutely was obsessed with. So I was super excited when I started reading this. I started looking for patterns. It is definitely not a pattern. He definitely took some inspiration, but it does not follow it was not like the story set followed that. So
there were no dragons in England?
There was no dragons.
The hell.
Bullshit.
Forget what you know about English history. All right, yeah. So thanks everyone for joining here tonight. Basically what I kind of figured this first episode would be for us is just kind of us recapping a little bit of watching season 1 here. We'll try to keep everything contained to season 1 and then kind of set the tone for what we're going to do kind of going forward with this podcast, hopefully. So basically to just kind of kick off here, the big thing that kind of starts is that cold, both in the true sense of it being a cold opening and it's set up in what is called the north area of the wall there where it is always cold. That cold opening there, basically, where we get kind of this introduction to what we learned eventually are called the oh my goodness, now it's just escaping me all of a sudden. The White Walkers. Thank you. Yes, the White Walkers there. Get kind of our first introduction to the White Walkers and these mythical things that are north of the wall there. I guess kind of Amanda here, anything kind of from you as far as how this kind of cold opening even set it, since you were that was the first episode you were kind of forced to watch, hey, watch this, you'll like it.
I remember watching that part and being like, oh god, is this a horror show? I don't usually do horror movies. And then I almost forgot about it for episodes because you don't really see it coming back until later on. So I think it actually sets it up really well because once you start getting an inkling something's going to happen, there's just that cold chill in your heart. You're like, oh god, wait a minute, I remember this.
I think the opening
no clue what they're getting into.
Well, the opening only really sets up Ned Stark's sense of justice, and then it just and then it just goes somewhere completely different for quite a while.
Well, I think the way it actually works is that whole Night's Watch north of the wall scene happens and then credits hit, basically. Sorry, not credits, the title scene hits. And then...
I think it was cold.
Sorry, what?
I do believe it was a cold open. It was before the main
now famous title song there and everything like that.
Justly so, because it's a beautiful piece of art. I love that. I always loved watching that. I never would have skipped through those things.
The introduction, the title sequence there, right? The whole overview of the map, the spinning sun.
Oh, it's so amazing.
Yeah, it's...
Yep.
And then the music too, I know in a lot of the earlier episodes of this podcast, I talked multiple times about how just amazing the music is in this show here. The one thing I will constantly
And
praise over and over is just the music for the show.
And I know HBO's always done a real good job at their music. If you listen to like Band of Brothers or John Adams, they always have really, really good music. The opening, like just like you said, zooming over the entire countryside and the Westeros, that was just so new and so novel. At least for me, it was. And I was just unprepared for how interested I would be in that opening, how much I never wanted to miss one, because it changed.
Hmm. I remember being fascinated just watching it, but it would also like it did a good job of the show with so many different characters and so many different places of helping you kind of keep track of where you were.
Yes,
Or
definitely.
give you a geolocation, yeah, on it.
Definitely. Yeah. I remember like that was like it took me I think on my second rewatch to kind of start or sorry, my second time watching here through here basically where I finally started piecing together character names and the actual actors in the show. And then kind of too
Mm-hmm.
like piecing that with on the map of like, okay, they're here, over here is this place and everything like that, which is really beneficial. And then too, like a little detail I don't know if a lot of people notice here too. After episode 1, every time like the actor's name comes up on screen, it's also tied to their house sigil there as well. So
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
yeah, so like Sean Bean, who is Ned Stark in the show, shows up with the direwolf sigil next to his name.
Hmm. I did not notice that. That
Um,
is interesting.
but yeah, then we are introduced to House Stark there. Gary, you want to take it over and talk about this a little bit here?
The house, all the kids and such. Okay. So there's the oldest brother, Rob, and then it goes Bran and Rickon. I'm effing up names. And and then there's the oldest sister, Sansa, and then her little sister, Arya. And then I guess something we talked about in a part that got lost in the unrecorded was the names of all the kids and all of their direwolf names. So Rob's direwolf was Greywind. Jon Snow, who was the unofficial sibling, was Ghost. Bran's was Summer.
Summer.
Summer, and then Rickon's was Shaggy Dog, and the two girls, the oldest, Sansa's was Lady because Sansa dreams of being a lady, and then Arya's Greyhound was Lemuria.
Nymeria.
Does it explain?
Warrior Queen.
Yeah, it was a.
I was gonna say where that name
it-
comes.
I think. Well, I was gonna say I think their dogs show really what those characters are supposed to be: lady, pretty princess girl, and then warrior queen dog with Tommy boy.
Yes. And Shaggy Dog, because if you allow a small child to pick the name of a dog, you'd be like, Shaggy Dog. Oh, okay.
Yeah, what do you expect? I think it's in. You know what's actually interesting is when they do come upon getting those dogs, they're walking away from that execution. And by the way, that execution shows really black and white how, well, I guess that shows brutally how black and white Ned Stark's sense of justice is. But they're walking away from that execution, and every single one of the kids there gets a dog except for Theon Greyjoy. And that kind of sets a tone for who's going to kind of it sets a tone for later on in the book, I should say. I shouldn't go further than that.
One to pull out a knife, though. Theon Greyjoy's like, hand him to me. I'll kill.
Yeah, that's a good.
Also, there's some symbolism in that first part with the direwolves because the mother direwolf is impaled by a stag, like a deer. So it's supposed to be some foreshadowing about how the Baratheons will be the end of the direwolves or the Starks. So.
That's right.
Yes,
but it's
The Starks, yeah, and the direwolf also killed the deer as well.
Yes.
Both ended up being the death of each other.
Something interesting as I'm like looking through the first episode on what is this called? Why can't I? Yeah, IMDb. Gosh, my brain is on IMDb. They have the parents' guide to any show to know if it's acceptable for kids to watch.
Oh.
Sex and nudity, severe. Violence and gore, severe. Profanity, moderate. Like alcohol, drugs, and smoking, mild. And then it's like frightening and intense scenes, severe. I'm just like, I think that covers everything. The beginning is pretty intense. And then like, I think the first episode, at least definitely the first half of the first season, is very heavy on violence, sex, just like really trying to get like the most distilled version of all these characters being real insane.
Definitely set a new standard for that. Like now when people are like, well, this show's gory, and I'm like, well, Game of Thrones gory or just like regular gory?
Yeah. Earlier we were talking about the comparisons of, Game of Thrones gory versus like a Walking Dead gory. Like Game of Thrones is a whole different level because they don't have to deal with any sort of censorship. They just make the artist's vision and that is it. And it has to be approximately an hour. Yeah. Later seasons played with that a lot more of how long an episode is.
Yeah, the HBO money versus the AMC money there, basically, of Walking Dead versus Game of Thrones there.
Also, a show that's not designed to have any commercial breaks.
Yep.
Which is I think also, I don't know how many other shows that really played with that. I know other HBO shows, The Sopranos, stuff like that, but like, you have to get used to that style of watching a show, which is like, you're going to sit down and you're going to sit here for an hour and like, you're not going to move. You can't get up, go grab a glass of water. Like you're here, you're in it.
It's an hour long show. It's not 45 minutes of show, 15 minutes of commercials. No, you're sitting here watching this entire show for 60 solid minutes.
Yep. I like it. I love that sort of, because it feels like when you're watching these shows, it feels almost like you're watching it for a longer amount of time than even that 1 hour says, because when you have those 15-minute breaks in between shows, you have to get a little bit of a recap when you come back. And so you're missing that and you just get more out of it.
Definitely. All right. So you guys did the Stark introduction here then.
And direwolf. We talked about each of the children, their direwolves.
Yep. And then part of the big thing going on at Winterfell there is they are preparing because they've been notified that Robert Baratheon, the king of Westeros, basically is on his way north to basically have a conversation with Ned Stark. Him and Robert and Ned basically are best friends. They were kind of raised together. They went to war together in Robert's Rebellion, and even like after that with the Greyjoy Rebellion there. But Robert is basically coming up to have a conversation with Ned, and kind of a little history about Robert's house there, the Baratheon house. So, Steven, think you could tackle that one?
A history of the Baratheon house? I'm not sure I'll be able
like
to
a
get
deep
that.
history, but like just a little bit there, kind of like Robert and his family.
So I guess Robert and his family are a complicated bunch. There is obviously Robert Baratheon, a king of the Westeros, king of the Seven Kingdoms, yeah. And he got that title by overthrowing the old king. So I don't remember the old king's name.
Aegon. No, not Aegon.
Aegar. Yep, crazy dude.
King.
Aerys. The Mad King Aerys.
King Aerys.
Aerys.
There we go. Yep.
We'll get on the fifth try.
Yeah, we'll get it one of these days. But he got that title from doing that, and to solidify the, I guess, rule of the kingdom, he marries Cersei Lannister from House Lannister, and I guess that's his wife. She is a kind and wholehearted person, and is probably the best person you'll meet in this entire book series and TV show. And so you'll like her. But then they have well, Cersei has 3 kids. And that is Joffrey, her oldest. Marcella, I believe, is middle, and then what's his name?
Omen.
Thank you. Tommen is the youngest, and they all have striking features. They look very much like their uncle for some reason.
All right.
And then Rob has 2 brothers, Stannis,
Oh,
who's
yep.
the Lord of
Forgot about them.
Storm's End?
Dragonstone.
Dragonstone. Who's the Lord of Storm's End?
That's Renly,
Renly, yeah.
youngest.
Because their original house, their original seat for their house is Storm's End, isn't it?
Yeah, I believe so.
And the Dragonstone is formerly the Targaryens' home.
Yep, that was their seat of power.
I think
Seat of power.
wasn't Dragonstone like the original landing spot of the Targaryens
Yes.
before they hit Westeros? It was kind of like where they established themselves somewhat.
Yep.
Yes, it was.
Okay.
And that's why it has so much. It has a lot of. I don't think it has very much strategic or very much economic influence on the west of the Westeros, but is very symbolically important.
Yes.
And Stannis is married and has 1 daughter and no sons.
Yep.
And Renly is very single, and you find out throughout the course is not a big fan of women. That sound makes him sound like a mean.
Hey! He likes women enough.
He has preferences towards men,
Yes.
as some do, and yeah. So that's kind of a taboo subject in royalty. So yeah.
And then every house in the series every major house has their own motto there. Baratheon is ours is the fury, right?
Yeah.
I do not remember.
Yes,
And
ours is the fury, and then
the Starks is
the other one's hear us roar.
Oh, that's the Lannister. What was it? Hear us roar. It's not Lannisters always pay their debts, although that's what the people of Westeros would like you to believe.
Yeah,
Hey,
I
they
think
have a
you're sure.
specific. Oh, look at that!
House Aaron, which is
The Lords of the Eyrie.
yes,
Mm-hmm.
as high as honor. House Baratheon is ours is the fury. House Greyjoy is we do not sow. House Lannister is hear me roar. Stark is winter is coming. Targaryen is blood and fire. Tully is family duty honor. Martell is unbound, unbent, unbroken. And House Tyrell is growing strong.
You have the Targaryen.
So everyone that can't see this happening, Gary has a placard that he is moving past the screen with every single one of these on it. It is absolutely amazing.
I can't actually see that. I'm sad.
Fire and blood, is that not the Targaryens?
You said it backwards. Blood and fire.
It's like 3 inches from my face as I'm holding it. But yes.
Okay, so we got Robert's family there kind of introduced. So Robert is famous because he overthrew the Targaryens there. And Amanda, do you want to talk about the Targaryens a little bit as far as like what we were introduced to in season 1 here?
In season 1, the Targaryens are pretty much no more. They were the ruling family of Westeros for a long time. They were power because they had dragons, and the dragons eventually died out. But when Robert overthrew them, 2 Targaryens did escape. They were very young at the time. Viserys was 7, I think. 7-ish, somewhere around that. And his baby sister Daenerys, who was born like in the middle of a storm, like during the rebellion, right? Because I believe they evacuated to Dragonstone to avoid part of it. So they fled across the narrow seas, and they are taking refuge across there.
It makes sense that she was born in a storm because she's Daenerys Stormborn.
Yeah, it did take me a while to actually connect that when I was reading the books.
I thought she was born in a storm as they were crossing. Was it born in a storm still while they were over there?
I thought it was born during a
Okay.
storm on Dragonstone, but I could be wrong.
I think she was
I
born.
know it was during a storm.
Yeah, during like the worst storm on Dragonstone or whatever, but I don't remember.
Okay.
I can't remember though the timeline wise if it was before or during or after the rebellion. And we should mention too, the books, the characters are a lot younger than they are in the show. They definitely age them up in the show a lot to make it more appropriate to watch there.
And even though they age them up, it is still the first episode is super uncomfortable. The first interaction you get between Viserys and Daenerys is just absolutely uncomfortable. And that's, I mean, I going into it, it's literally Viserys walking up to his sister, basically naked, pinching her nipple, and just you're sitting there, just like, oh my god, I don't want to be watching this right now. This is really, really weird, and I don't like it. And so that is the dynamic that the Targaryens have.
Yes.
Yeah, it took them some time to explain some of that too. Like, it took you a little bit to understand. And the Targaryens married brother to sister for years to keep their bloodlines. And so now there's only 2 left.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it at the time I remember like watching it originally there. It's like, okay, this is definitely awkward, brother and sister doing that. But then like especially like after you've read the books and go, oh geez, they're supposed to be a lot younger than this in the books too. It's just like, okay, I see now why everything kind of was aged up as much as it kind of was there to me.
And it's still
it's still definitely uncomfortable, but I mean it would have been, I mean definitely they couldn't have ever showed it or done it or whatever had it been the other way around, but it's just like this could have been way worse, but this is still very, very uncomfortable.
Yeah. And that's I have mixed feelings about that one scene just because they do a very good job of making you feel very uncomfortable about it. I don't think anyone got off on that scene, and I think there are plenty of scenes that people can get off to in Game of Thrones. That is not one of them. That is a scene that you see boobs and you're like, please put them away. Please, I don't want this. This is not good.
And the scene sets up the fact that she's immune to heat, though.
It does, yeah. And
yeah, that's right.
There's some discussion going on, I think, in the books too. Compared, it's like something they changed in the show compared to the books. Of, I want to say it was written by George has come out and said before that like the books it was magic and a one-time deal or whatever. And we'll touch on this a little later when we get towards the end of talking about the season 1. But it was like a one-time deal that she was immune to fire, not something like Targaryens passively carry on. Am I remembering that correctly?
Yeah, like it wasn't other Targaryens. This wasn't just a family trait.
That would make sense. I don't know. It kind of becomes a running gag, though. Not gag. It's a running thing that like she's picks up a smoldering hot dragon egg and is just like, oh, I didn't even notice. Mm-hmm. Isn't that weird?
So to kind of touch on a little bit here too, like the big thing with the introduction between the Stark family and the Baratheon family, kind of getting back to that scene at Winterfell, there is Robert has rode north basically to try and talk to Ned to try and convince him to come to King's Landing with him to become his Hand of the King, which the Hand of the King, if my understanding is correctly, is basically like just the maybe.
Well, there's a phrase for it.
There, go for it.
The king shits in one hand, or the king shits and the hand cleans it up.
There we go. And we kind of learned a little bit more, too, while we're in King's Landing about how Robert kind of has been ruling the Seven Kingdoms since he took over. But Robert has rode north to try and convince Ned to come with him to King's Landing. And then they also, too, try and set up a marriage between Robert's oldest son, Joffrey, and Ned's oldest daughter, Sansa.
And you also find out that the previous Hand of the King died.
Yes.
Yep.
Possibly.
Do you see him at some point? I was looking at the IMDb list of characters.
You see his body.
An actor who takes credit as being John Aaron. and I was like, I didn't even know he was ever.
You
And
see his body laid out like when they had coins on his eyes and it was just being prepared,
Yeah,
I
like
think, but you don't see him alive.
the first episode is kind of like a mashing together of time. There basically like it. A lot of time happens between a lot of the events that happens in the first episode, but there is definitely a scene in King's Landing where it's Jaime and Cersei talking in proximity to Jon Arryn's body.
And I think we talked about it previously that like the actual traveling distance between Winterfell and King's Landing is like a month on the
Yeah.
road.
Yep.
Yep.
It's a
So, I
long
mean,
time.
they have
And
time to get
it's
notice of it and for the entire court to travel up there between
like
in
several
this
times in
episode.
season one, like they travel back and forth on the King's Road, like in the matter of like an episode or less, and it's actually like a 1 month's journey.
I mean, like I'm sure
Yeah.
there's a difference though between like later on in the episode, Kat leaves Winterfell to travel to King's Landing to talk to Ned. She's riding like in a smaller company than what Ned was riding in with the king there. Basically, that would probably take a lot longer for the king's procession to reach King's Landing than it would just say a couple of people riding back and forth.
Because doesn't she beat him there? He gets there before he does? Or is it around the same time?
I think it was the same episode that it happened. They're like the episode opens with basically like Ned arriving and kind of them setting up in the Tower of the Hand, and then later on, Kat shows up at the gates of King's Landing, I believe. But let's see here. Just kind of looking back at some of my notes here too. There's a lot of what's really great about the show here is there's a lot of character interactions that happen. Like you like the show for not only just the action stuff that happens from time to time in the show, but definitely just like a lot of the character interactions that kind of go on throughout the series. There, the characters basically sitting down and talking to one another. Like one of my first notes that I've made here before is just like the interaction between Tyrion, which did we cover House Lannister a little bit there?
Not really, besides Cersei.
Okay.
Steven said she was a wonderful woman.
She was. She's a great, great woman.
She's lovely. So lovely.
So do we just kind of the Lannisters, the the father who's not shown until a couple episodes in is
Tywin.
Tywin Lannister.
Mm-hmm.
And then his two oldest children are twins, and that's Cersei and Jaime. And then Tyrion is the youngest, and their mother would die during childbirth, and he's a dwarf. So Cersei in particular like holds a very large hatred towards Tyrion because one, he's a dwarf, and two, like just the act of him coming into this world killed her mother, so she's a little bitter.
Tywin has
And
that
I
same
think that-
hatred too.
Yeah. I think everyone really has that hatred of Tyrion except for his brother. And I think that is a big exception in his close circle of, whoever he knows. They bear a grievance against him for being inadequate, except for his brother, who seems to want to give him a shot.
And I think at one point Tywin sort of uses his children, and so he married off his daughter to gain like a closer wrangle on the throne, and he taught his son to be this great swordsman, and he's always held the disdain that his son is this great swordsman and a great knight, and he's literally just guards the king, and it seemed underwhelming for the honor he deserved. And then Tyrion, who no one seems to respect, like just determined at some point that he's never going to be a great knight. So he's just someone who's very learned in books, and because he realized he won't ever be able to beat someone with a sword, but he might be able to beat them with his wits or out-strategy them.
Yeah.
Because once you either win or you die.
Yeah, definitely. Like Tywin is he is all about power and his family. He basically, like, everyone else is playing checkers while Tywin Lannister was out there playing like 4D chess, trying to basically stay ahead of everyone here, pretty much to keep House Lannister in the front and center of being like the most powerful family in Westeros.
I think there's a line at some point where he says that he's trying to set up a dynasty. Like he's trying to set up his children so that like
He's trying to continue the dynasty.
Continue the dynasty. And I think it alludes to something that's probably covered more in the book and not so much in the series, which is the whichever house like kind of suddenly disappears because of a revolution.
Oh,
It's the
ones that the Lannisters destroyed, or
it's the House Castamere. Is that it? Because
Yeah, the Reigns of Castamere.
there's the famous
Castamere.
the song they have in there. Everyone kind of talks to them about under their breath, like the Reigns of Castamere. I think it's the Castamere family, right?
don't know if it's
Yeah.
Castamere family or if the location was called Castamere and the family was something else, but it's something like that.
Basically a family that like was very powerful, and then in the course of a couple political
House Rain.
Oh yeah, that's why it's Reigns of Castamere.
The Reigns of
That's clever.
Castamere. In the course of like a very short period of time, like their whole dynasty gets wiped out.
Yeah, Tywin is actually he is setting up the dynasty. Like he's not really continuing it as much. He's just basically setting it up because he has basically taken the Lannister house and basically risen it up in his time, basically of being the head of the house there, pretty much. If my memory serves me correctly, because basically he wiped off the family reign, basically for slighting him, I think, or whatever, and then he was like hand of the king for many years to oh boy, I've already forgot his name now. The king, Aerys, right? The Mad King.
Ares, yeah.
Yep, Aerys.
Yeah.
He was the hand of that king there, and basically he's been just funding like House Lannister is always portrayed as being the richest family in Westeros too. So he's always kind of propped that up too, of like they've helped fund the kingdom there basically by providing the kingdom gold for everything too. Definitely.
And a Lannister always pays his debts.
Yes, the secret motto of House Lannister. The Lannisters always pay their debts. But back to kind of where I was going there, I was talking a little bit there just about how the show does a great job of just kind of these character interactions. Like they do excellent work too, a lot with like a lot of the action beats and everything that you'll see later on when they get a bigger budget for the show. But like just the interactions between characters is what really set this show up too as well. Like I was going to point out, there was a couple of interactions kind of at Winterfell between Tyrion Lannister and Jon Snow. Both of them are kind of basically like the black sheep essentially of their family. Jon is the bastard of the House Stark, and Tyrion is the dwarf of House Lannister there basically. And I always remember the line there basically that Tyrion talks to Jon about there basically of he told Jon Snow of wear the name bastard like armor basically because they can't use it then to hurt you. So basically he was just telling Jon to kind of accept who you are, to kind of put up the guard around you so they can't really take that then from you and use it against you to kind of anger you.
All dwarves are bastards in the eyes of their fathers.
Oh yeah.
Yes. And kind of it's like that introduction there of characters kind of having these conversations with one another. It's just, in my view, it's just kind of like just one of the things that definitely set this show up here. Let's see here. Other things that kind of happen here too in this first episode is we get so part of the Targaryens, what they're trying to do is they've fled Westeros here, but now they're trying to kind of build an army to kind of come back to Westeros and reclaim what they believe is their kingdom. And one of the ways they hope to do that is they are going to marry Dany off to a Dothraki lord named Khal Drogo, and that ends up happening there because then the brother Viserys believes then that once Dany is married and they get a child and everything, that Drogo will then give his army to Viserys to kind of help retake Westeros. But then this wedding does happen here, and it's interesting. You get introduced to another character named Jorah Mormont, who you learn a little bit more about here too, kind of as time goes on. But I always like there's a line kind of that happens in the wedding there. Dany witnesses like this brutality of the Dothraki wedding there, and somebody says in a quick little comment there of like, a Dothraki wedding without 3 deaths is dull. Just to kind of set up
A dull affair.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Just to kind of set up like the Dothraki themselves are these, I don't want to say savages, but they're brutal. Yes. And also too, so we've touched on the brutality of this show here, and episode 1 ends in just a very brutal fashion there. Gary, you want to kind of take over a little bit with how episode 1 ends?
So the last scene is you see Cersei and Jaime Lannister being romantic in a secluded tower, and then all of a sudden you cut to Bran, who's climbing around the outside, and he kind of peeks in a window, and then Jaime gets up and as Jaime walks over to go talk to Bran, you hear Cersei say, like, he can't know, like, no one can know. And Jaime, like, brings Bran in and says, oh no, don't worry, like, what are you doing climbing here? And then it ends with him, like, pushing Bran out the window and saying, like, the things I do for love.
Yes, setting up that Jaime is kind of a terrible person. The Lannisters are kind of somewhat terrible people, that they're trying to murder a child here. I mean, granted, what they're doing is not
The things they'll do to
incest.
keep a secret. Keep their dynasty.
Yeah.
Yeah. So back to when I said that for whatever reason Cersei's kids looked like her uncle, or looked like their uncle, there's a reason for that.
You don't say.
Ah.
There's a couple throwaway lines in the first season about when Cersei's talking to the other mother, who's just Catelyn Stark. She talks about how her when she lost her first son was a brown-haired boy, and how Robert punched the walls and all that. And so I think it's supposed to allude to the fact that the only true-born son he had, like, maybe was just sort of killed off. I don't think that was ever alluded to in the books, but I think it was just kind of a throwaway line.
Yeah. Another kind of big event that happens in here, so is we've got Bran. Basically, Bran is the child that Gary had mentioned that was pushed out the window. He's basically laying in bed trying to recover. He survived the fall, but he was kind of knocked into what we would probably call a coma, or just knocked completely unconscious there. An event that happens there basically is, so Ned has left Winterfell, so it's basically Cat, and then Robb Stark is there as well too. Cat hasn't left Bran's room the entire time pretty much, and then some diversion basically gets started out in the yard, where then this assassin shows. Yes, thank you. A fire starts. Robb runs out to try and take care of this or whatever. That leaves Cat alone in the room with Bran, and then it's found that there's an assassin actually in the room who's trying to kill Bran to basically finish off, to basically put him out of his misery, which kind of then starts a whole series of events happening throughout the season here that kind of set up for how the larger Game of Thrones story kind of unfolds.
Mm-hmm. And one of the interesting things about that assassin is when he ends up getting stopped, because obviously the thing goes on, but the knife he's using is Valyrian steel knife, which is not something you come upon easily. It is a rich instrument, and had to have been given to this assassin or bought by this assassin with a whole crap ton of money. So it was a very professional assassin. It wasn't some random dude. So Catelyn immediately suspects the Lannisters are about it. And I don't remember where she gets told that. Is it Peter Baelish that tells her that it is actually Tyrion's knife? He sees it and he goes, "Oh, where'd you get that knife?" and I don't remember exactly what she says, but oh yeah, that was, I think Tyrion won it off me in a game or something like that.
Does tell her that, yeah.
Weird misdirects in season 1 that like you're like, oh, like I don't know if it. Do you ever actually find out who? Obviously the Lannisters hired the assassin, but how it happened? Because I don't think it's ever implied that Tyrion was actually the person who hired the assassin, was he?
Find out in the books. I don't know about the show. The other thing I would say in the first episode is Catelyn's sister was married to Jon Arryn, and when he died, she's his widow, and she sent Catelyn Stark a message saying, I believe it said the Lannisters killed her husband.
Yes.
Yep.
She suspected the Lannisters killed her husband. I know I'm reviewing just some of my notes I've had since I took them down for basically like some of the earlier episodes. I've got a couple of times where I've cursed out Joffrey there, Gary's favorite character in the entire show.
He's just misunderstood.
Oh yes.
He's about as misunderstood as a brick hurling at your face.
I know too in the first season, it comes right at episode 2. We get our first visualization of the wall. This is definitely something that like drew me into the show. For whatever reason, I can't like even like on rewatches, I can't quite pin down why I found this entire area of the entire show just so fascinating. Is basically like a little history is hundreds of years ago. One of the Starks named Brandon Stark, or he was later referred to as Bran the Builder, commissioned basically them to build a wall in the north that separated a section of what became the north and the farther north basically there. And it was kind of to stop what was the White Walkers from coming south. They was basically imbued with magic and spells and stuff like that to stop the White Walkers from coming south. And as part of that, they set up what was called the Night's Watch Order there. These people kind of sworn to this code to live and die defending the Seven Kingdoms from what was north of the Wall. Well, as as the years kind of passed, the White Walkers kind of faded into this forgotten kind of thing, this legend and story kind of realm. And then I don't know whatever started people going north of the Wall, but then there was basically people north of the Wall that ended up becoming, they were called wildlings. They're pretty much because they lived north of the Wall. They were wild. They weren't believed to have believed any code or honor or societal. Free folk, yes. And they ended up becoming kind of even though they were humans and everything like that, they become the enemies of the Night's Watch. So then the Night's Watch spends years basically keeping the wildlings at bay while their numbers kind of slowly diminish over time, and they have to kind of consolidate down further and further to kind of what their order becomes.
And I think they're presented, the Night's Watch is presented in the first couple episodes as really noble, really like an almost elite kind of mystical organization, and also a punishment slightly, which is kind of a weird, juxtaposition. And it's kind of, well, I guess you kind of think of it as like maybe a monk order or something like that, which is something that we are disabused of that notion as we go through later the season 1. But it is, at least in this first couple episodes, especially when John in this episode 2 decides to join his uncle Brandon. Is it Brandon? Brendan. His uncle Brendan, who happens, who we haven't. He's also in town, by the way, getting recruits for the Night's Watch, and John happens to join, and that's kind of when Ned heads to King's Landing. This assassin strikes. At that same time, John is on his way to the Wall, and I don't remember the name of the fort at the Wall that he's going to exactly.
Castle Black.
Yes.
Thank you, Castle Black. That should have been easy to remember.
Do you remember when I was reading the books, like even having seen the first episode of the show, I couldn't quite grasp like how big and huge the wall was. Like in my head, I think
Yeah.
I was thinking something like the Great Wall, and I was like, okay, made of ice, I get it, big wall. No, this thing is huge. It's enormous. It spans the entire like length of that continent, which is rather narrow there, but like, and how tall is the thing? Something like 70 meters. It's insanely tall
Yeah.
and super thick.
Yeah, I had the same exact reaction as Tyler had. I don't know exactly why I was so struck by it, but you see that wall and you're just like, that's a wall. That is a wall.
That's gonna stop something from coming.
Yeah. I don't know what I was thinking about. They're going to stop before here, but that, sir.
They also had to use a lot of interesting tricks to try to give the scale. Like, I guess I didn't assume it was as big until later seasons because, like, they sort of showed, like, oh, here's a castle and it's next to this sort of big wall. But, like, I think until you see that they have to, like, take an elevator to get to the top, like, you don't realize how big of a wall it is.
Hmm. Definitely,
And
yeah.
off the top of it or something, like.
Yeah, Tyrion's one goal is, since he's up north, he wants to head to the wall and then piss off the edge of the world.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's where we had that they had that conversation you referenced as well between Tyrion and Jon about being bastards. And what do you do? Oh, well, I read. The famous line.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And a mind needs books like a sword needs a whetstone. He said that to him.
Yes.
Yes. I do want to back up to one point that you had talked about, Stephen, of Ned and Jon on the King's Road there, basically. Like, they head out from Winterfell together. And you kind of learn there that Jon doesn't know who his mother is. He's believed to be... He's been told that he's Ned's son, but he doesn't know who his mother is. So he asks Ned, basically, like, before they kind of diverge, where Ned starts heading south and Jon starts heading north, and like, hey, can you tell me about my mom and everything like that? And Ned says that line to him, basically, of like, next time I see you, we'll discuss who your mother is. So it's kind of, it's interesting there to learn that, because all throughout the first season too, you're told how Ned Stark is this honorable person who always kind of puts, like, duty before everything else. He doesn't stray from the path, basically, of right or wrong, really. There, how there now he has this one mistake of having fathered a bastard child, basically, when he was already married during Robert's rebellion there. And then
Also, you learn that Catelyn does not like Jon Snow.
No.
And so I guess that's probably why he didn't ask until they were out of Winterfell, of like, because obviously Catelyn Stark doesn't really think highly of him or would appreciate being asked about this, like, woman that Ned cheated with. Like,
yeah, it's even funny too, because like nobody really knows, because Robert, his friend, even asked Ned about, like, the gal who made the honorable Ned Stark
break his vows.
or something like that too. Yeah, so it's kind of interesting that Robert, Ned's best friend, basically, who they went to war with, Robert doesn't even know who the mother is. But to kind of just keep kind of flowing a little bit through, like, the first season here too, Jorah Mormont, who I touched on a little bit, he's introduced in the first episode there. He becomes kind of you learn that he's basically been banished from Westeros there for being a slaver, and he kind of takes up following the Targaryens and kind of takes somewhat, you can kind of tell, of a liking towards Dany as the season progresses there a little bit more and more. But you learn a little bit more about him and kind of what he's actually doing there. So maybe Amanda, do you want to kind of touch a little bit more on what Jorah's doing there with the Targaryens?
Well, to them, he tells them that he's there to support them. He's been banned, so he doesn't have anything else to go back. He can't go back without them. So he's there. He comes and he offers Viserys his sword. I believe he does this at Daenerys' wedding, actually. And Viserys, absolutely thrilled to have the support of an actual knight of Westeros, happily accepts. Which I suspect Jorah will soon regret, because Viserys, He's not exactly a shining king in waiting.
He has a cool head. What are you talking about?
He is very much. He's grown up with that thing of, he was the last Targaryen. It should be his throne. Blah blah blah. And he is a cruel and interesting person. Anyhow,
And he deserves a crown of gold.
that's what he says. And so Jorah is there. Jorah, he takes his liking to Daenerys, but we also find out that Jorah is not necessarily completely cut off from Westeros.
Yeah. He's we can talk about this since this is all like in the first season there. He's basically there to spy on the Targaryens, I think, fully. And
Yep.
is he?
He's at one point asked. Yes, from Lord Varys, he was sent out there to keep an eye on them. So he sends them information back to the Lannisters and lets them know. And soon enough, when Daenerys becomes pregnant, he reports that little fact back, at which point Robert Baratheon orders her assassinated.
Yes. And this comes in a small council session, which, Stephen, do you want to talk a little bit more about what the small council is there in King's Landing?
So the small council is run by the Hand of the King, who is basically what we would say the primary advisor and counselor of state. So it is the primary decision-making and economic and political function body of the Westeros. So it's composed of, and I'm going to get this wrong, it's the Hand, the militia commander, Peter Baelish is there.
Master of Coin.
He's the Master of Coin.
And
Master of Coin.
The Lord
What?
Commander of the not the Night's Watch. Gold Cloaks. No.
Yep.
Kingsguard.
Yep.
Kingsguard. Basically, everyone who has a real say in decision-making policy is there. And this is the place where, say, in episode 3, they start talking about how badly the kingdom's finances have been managed, and how much money they are loaning out from the good Lord Lannisters. And I think that's an interesting dynamic in the book and in the TV show, because it does show how, through wanton abuse of his station as king, basically the kingdom has been sold to the Lannisters. They are in such debt to the Lannisters. And these small, usually the king doesn't even attend these small council meetings. It's completely run by the Hand. This one that orders the assassination of a small child, as it is said, he does attend, and it is fairly controversial, if I remember correctly. There is a fair amount of people there who, as I said, don't want to order the assassination of a small child in their eyes. And to the king, though, this is the spawning of a new rebellion. This is another generation of a new rebellion, and she needs to be put down. And it's the small council is very important for a long time. It's I'm not going to say the entire time, but for a long time in this.
I will say too, like, it's something we discussed in like some of our earlier podcast episodes there, basically, of just how Robert Baratheon is basically, I think we called him like the absent king there, basically. Like he wanted to overthrow the Targaryens, but then when it came to ruling, he didn't really want to do that. He wanted the pomp and circumstance that went along with being king, but he didn't want the nitty-gritty details of having to run the kingdom. I think
to steal a line from Hamilton, winning's easy, ruling's harder.
Yeah, I think, Gary, you touched on this a lot more, kind of, especially like in our first couple episodes.
Yeah, he's a great warrior. Like, I think somewhere in the book it talked about how he could, like, when he was really in his youth, he could swing this warhammer and like crush a guy's breastplate. Like he was just this like just like absolutely fucking fear-wrenching dude who like no one in the right mind would F with. And then you see him in present day when he's just a drunk, like he won all of his battles, like, but in the war he won it, so why he got himself to a place in life where he never had to fight again, and so became too fat for his breastplate. But yeah, I just remember reading the book, which, as someone who watched the whole first season and then read audiobook, the first book, like he is described much more like this guy is somebody you wouldn't fuck with. And then yeah,
definitely he definitely is not the person that overthrew the Targaryens when it comes time to Ned taking over as Hand of the King anymore. He is a long way off from being that warrior pretty much that he was.
Well, and I think that is, I mean, he is a warrior, and that's what he does. But you don't get a warrior to lead. I think that's the issue. There is they elected the chief warrior to be the chief statesperson, and it's going to lead to a lot of problems, and it does.
Also, the friendship between Robert Baratheon and Ned Stark was that they were both wards under
Jon Arryn.
And so that's why when Robert becomes king, he elects Jon Arryn to be the Hand of the King, because he's just an older, more lordly figure. And, you know, for someone's mentor, I feel like that's the sort of title you give them. Like, you know, only one person can be king, and Robert's king, but what honor can you bestow upon your mentor? And it's like, let them be the Hand of the King until the Lannisters come around.
Other things to just kind of touch on as we kind of get towards the end here of you get introduced to Maester Aemon at the Night's Watch there in this first season, which I think Maester Aemon was a great character in the show there, and definitely too, like reading more about him in the books too, he was so interesting. Like every time you kind of read a little bit more about him there. Another thing I kind of want to touch on too just a little bit is just speaking of kind of like the legends and the stories of the White Walkers there too. That's one of the stories. The lady is referred to as Old Nan. She's kind of like like a babysitter's not the right word that I'm looking for here, but
a nursemaid or a.
Oh yeah, that's a good
yeah, definitely. She's sitting there talking to Bran there, basically, as Bran's laying in bed, and she's regaling him with like the stories of the long night there, basically the longest winter in memory there, basically, when the White Walkers came the last time, which was many, many generations ago. You also get introduced to Hodor, the large stable boy the House Stark has there at Winterfell, whose big thing is he only says his name there. That's the only word that he ever says is Hodor. You also learn a little bit more about, you get introduced to Samwell Tarly, who has, I think, probably one of the most tragic backstories of why he's at the wall there, of all the characters pretty much at the wall.
Speaking of Hodor, one of the few incidents of male nudity in Game of Thrones.
Yeah, good point there, Gary.
One of the things about my thing of Hodor and his early backstory is like, oh, you are a big boy. Hodor, put on clothes. Oh, Hodor. Anyway, continue. Sorry.
Let's see what else kind of just happens there. To touch a little bit on too, we get the so when Ned gets there, they try to have the jousting tournament, the Hand of the King tourney there, basically. And that's where you get more introduced there, basically, to the two brothers of House Clegane, Sandor Clegane, who is known as the Hound there, basically. And then his it's his older brother, right? Gregor
Yeah.
is the older one,
Hmm.
known as the Mountain, or is it the Mountain Who Rides? I think he goes by. It's like two different names he's kind of known by, or
Yeah, I
sometimes
think
two.
I think they shorten it to the Mountain.
Yep. Or he's also known as Tywin's dog. There, basically, he is Mad Dog. Yep. He is the thing Tywin Lannister sends out when he wants stuff to get done, and also done very brutally.
Get broken. Yeah.
You also get introduced to one of the first members of House Tyrell, Loras Tyrell, who's taking part in the jousting tournament, which he ends up winning due to a little nefarious cheating on his part there to help dethrone the Mountain there, which upsets the Mountain, and that's where you get the first Clegane Bowl matchup there, basically, of Xander versus Gregor.
Also, the first actor to play the Mountain, which I think it was like easily into one of the last couple seasons before someone I read that like, oh, there's like 3 actors who portrayed this one character. And I was like, oh,
I did not know that.
You didn't see that?
No, I didn't know
That's
that.
funny.
like the actor who plays him in that one episode in season 1, I don't think he ever shows up again. It's somebody else in season 2, and it might even be a different actor at the end of the series when he shows up, but yeah. Anyway, he doesn't talk much. Just
No, he just grunts and murders.
brooding.
One of the other major plot points that happens as everyone starts moving is the capture of Tyrion.
Yes.
Because what's her name? Caitlin is bound and determined after she is told by Peter Baelish that it is Tyrion's knife, that he was the assassin. So she literally flies out of Winterfell to go hunt down this little midget, and she finds him. She captures him, sorta.
I think it's a happenstance run in.
Yeah.
In a
Riverland.
yeah.
So as Catelyn is heading back north from King's Landing, Tyrion has finished his adventure at the Wall and is now heading back south with Bronn and some other sellswords.
Oh, that's right.
I think Bronn is just hanging out in the Riverlands, actually.
Yeah, I think he met him at this point.
Yeah, and I think it's one of the episodes just ends with Catelyn like sort of, I don't know, bullshitting all these guys in a bar of like how great and honorable they are and their houses are, and it's like, hey, now
Reminding them of their allegiance to her family.
You want to go imprison this dude?
Yep.
Yeah, and then kind of that's another one of those dominoes that kind of keeps getting pushed forward there, basically, because then later on, what is Ned doing? I think Ned's talking to Peter Baelish about something, but he ends up like.
Are you talking about when he gets captured?
Yes.
No, he is going. So Ned at this point has found that Aaron was onto something. The seed is strong, whatever the fuck that means. And so he's trying to figure out why the seed is strong or something like that. And that leads him to a brothel. He goes into this brothel and finds someone that the king had slept with. And she had been a virgin before that. And now she has a kid, and things start clicking in his mind. And then he walks out with his faithful companion that I thought was going to be there forever. I don't remember his name off the top of my head, but he's one of the guards that I really liked that guard, guys. And they are immediately surrounded by Lannister soldiers, and every single one of the Stark soldiers is killed, and I think that Ned is taken into custody at that point.
He's injured gravely.
Injured. Okay.
His leg is messed up.
Okay, something I just caught that I would never have caught before. The guy who's in King's Landing, Jory Cassell, has the same last name as Roderick Cassell. So it's possibly he's the son of the guy who rides south with Catelyn.
Oh, the Master at Arms dude?
The Master at Arms, the one with the sweet white beard that's like twisted at the bottom.
Yes, okay.
Yep.
Anyway,
Didn't catch that before.
as I'm IMDbing, I'm just like, oh, well, they have the same last name. I didn't even know that guy had a last name, so congratulations to him. He got more than 3 lines in Game of Thrones, and he has a last name.
Kind of too, as part of the capture of Tyrion there, Tyrion is taken to the Eyrie where Catelyn's sister, what is her name? Oh, Lysa Arryn, is this holding the seat there. And then this is where we learn the famous phrase, trial by combat. Tyrion demands a trial by combat to prove he's innocent. The way that works is 2 combatants fight with one another to the death, and whoever wins kind of is deemed to be the right side of their cause or whatever. So the gods deem it correctly that this guy died because his person was guilty or whatever.
Make him fly out the moon door, Dad, Mommy.
Another point, and I'll let you kind of touch a little bit more on this since you hinted at this, Stephen, here is the golden crown that is placed upon Viserys' head.
Viserys is a very kind and patient human being. And so, as being a kind and patient human being, the only thing he does to Khal Drogo, who owns every single warrior around him and has been shown to be a super brutal person, is bitch. All he does is whine and gripe and complain and yell. And eventually, he's sitting sulking at some party. I don't exactly remember why. And he just freaks out. He's like, I just want my golden crown. You people, you did all this, blah, blah, blah. And Cal goes, oh, you just want the golden crown? Oh, we can give you a golden crown. And he looks at his wife and she's like, yeah, do it. And he's like, we will give you a golden crown. At this point, Viserys is like, that's all I ever wanted. I'm so happy. And so he is held his shoulders and have a bucket of molten gold poured over his skull. And that's how he got his golden crown.
He broke their religious beliefs.
Yeah, he brought he brought a weapon into that sacred city. And also he threatened he threatened Daenerys with it too. Like, was not smart.
He's been threatening Daenerys every single time.
Yeah, but he took the sword to her and held it to her stomach because she's pregnant. And he said he was going to get his army, or he was going to cut out the baby.
And is it to bear a weapon or even to carry a weapon in their sacred city? I
think it's to shed blood, actually, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, definitely to shed blood, but I thought it was even just carrying a weapon is...
Yeah, I think carrying a weapon was still bad news bears.
I like how you gave Khal Drogo an Irish accent there, Stephen.
Yeah, Stephen, maybe you should go into drama, because that was great.
The dramatic retelling of the death of Viserys.
So, Stephen, from now on,
as told by an Irishman.
You're going to now give little caps of like episodes from now on.
Other things here, I guess, to kind of touch on there. We learned, again, as you had alluded to, Amanda, that Jorah was there to spy on Daenerys. He ended up stopping the assassination attempt on her there because he knew it was coming. And we kind of learned that he's now kind of flipped allegiances there. He's now more loyal to Dany than he ever would now be to anyone back in Westeros. The big thing that happens here is, so Ned is on his way to kind of uncovering what is going on with Robert's children, air quotes there. He's learning more and more that they probably aren't his children, and he confronts Cersei about that. And just as kind of all of this is kind of slowly going down too, Robert's out hunting because, of course, he's got nothing better to do than, he's not going to rule his kingdom, so he's going to go out hunting, and ends up getting to be too drunk and gets gored by a boar out in the wilderness there, basically, and ends up dying because of this. And Ned kind of then works on a plan to kind of not necessarily put the Lannisters in charge, but it ends up kind of backfiring on him because he trusts Peter Baelish, and as we learn, never trust Peter Baelish.
Never trust Peter Baelish.
And this results in Ned basically being captured, and basically sets off again more chain of events that kind of come throughout the show here. Of now the North is rising up against the throne there, basically because they want their liege lord back, and then now they want independence because they're tired of basically being underneath the rule of the Iron Throne. Other than that, maybe kind of jumping back over to, maybe we'll kind of wrap up what happens with Dany here. Amanda, do you want to kind of talk a little bit more about how Dany's story kind of heads to the end of season 1?
Yes, Dany, she's pregnant at this point. There's a prophecy about her baby, which I believe it was the stallion who will melt the world. Now that her brother is dead, she's been kind of pushing Khal Drogo to like more and more, because now she is actually truly the last Targaryen, and she's aware that if she doesn't do anything, like there's no more Targaryens ever ruling Westeros, not that there are right now, but she starts pushing him more and more, and this doesn't really happen. Like, he is not really swayed by this, because the Dothraki, they're not fans of the ocean. They see no reason for any of this. There's no reason to cross it. They've got plenty of riches here. Until the assassin happens. At that point, that kind of sways Khal Drogo. And Khal Drogo starts, he's planning to do it. He's gonna cross the sea, and he's gonna take over Westeros. And so to do this, he starts gathering men and supplies. And the Dothraki, they don't really gather them so much as they attack, they take over towns, they wipe them out. And in so doing, in one of these, I believe Daenerys tried to stop some of the Dothraki from raping some women, and some of the Dothraki got upset about this. Took an issue with it. Khal Drogo had to kind of fight him off, and he got a little scratch. Not a big deal, except for it got infected. Khal Drogo, yeah, just a scratch, but it got infected. He ends up passing away. This is not good for Daenerys at all, because the Dothraki, they only respect power or strength. Like, no one's going to follow an unborn child, and she doesn't really understand that there's a different culture here. She thinks that she's carrying his son, they'll all follow him. Nope, no one's going to follow an unborn baby. It has to be strength or nothing. Don't just follow the next one. There's no clear line of kin. She also kind of goes to some magical means. One of the women that she saves, quote unquote saves, offers to help, and I don't even know how to sum up that entire ceremony, but there's blood and there's possibly demons. There's bad stuff happening, but she loses her baby for it. And Khal Drogo, he doesn't die quite yet. He's a vegetable. He's a husk of his former self. He is alive. That's about it. He has no sense of himself. He doesn't talk. He has no recognition of anything. Actually, Daenerys ends up killing him herself, doesn't she?
Mm-hmm.
Others him with a pillow?
Yep.
Yeah. He's nothing anymore for her, and she realizes that, but she loses all of the Dothraki, except for a few followers. I believe when she wakes up, the Khalasar are simply gone. She's got the old, the infirm, or those that were like super loyal to her, but it's a handful. Like, it's nothing.
They're saying that the culture, like you pointed out, the culture of the Dothraki is to follow a warlord. And so it is not a political system as most people would think of it. It is a warlordism. And so when the warlord dies or is no longer able to lead, they fracture into new centers of power. And so his loyal, what are they called? The Riders? Or what are they?
The Blood Riders, blood of his blood.
Yeah, the Blood Riders. His loyal Blood Riders, all being their own now center of powers, become their own calls, and they go off and form their own little bands.
So Daenerys is left to take care of Khal Drogo's body. So they they build a giant pyre to burn him on, and they set it on fire. and Daenerys, who's pretty distraught from all of this. She's lost her baby, she's lost her husband, she's lost her brother, she's lost everything pretty much. Ends up walking into the fire.
And she burns the witch.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
right.
she
She
does.
does burn the witch.
Yeah, she does.
And
Does burn the witch.
we should also mention too that at her wedding she was gifted 3 what were believed to be
Petrified
raw-
dragon
petrified.
eggs.
There we go. That's the words I was looking for. Petrified dragon eggs.
Yeah, she kind of became obsessed with them. She always loved to see them and she liked to hold them. But they were told the ages had turned them to stone. She also put those in the fire, I believe.
Hmm.
So, the last shot you end up seeing is her walking into the fire. Everyone's upset. They think she's gonna die. Except for when the flames go away in the morning, it all dies down. She's standing there. Clothes are burned away, but she's still alive, and there's 3 new little dragons sitting with her.
And I think that's how the season actually ends, is like that shot of the dragons crying out and everything like that. I just remember too, going back to my thing I'll probably touch on a lot, it's just the music is just so good there.
So amazing.
It just gets you pumped up. It's like, I can't wait to figure out what happens next.
Yeah, it's a stunning end to this first season. Like,
Dragons, like these mythical things, are now reborn into the world of Westeros again. Or I should say, not Westeros, but into the world again.
And you just witnessed, like, you've seen a whole bunch of brutality, you've seen a whole bunch of nudity, you've seen a whole bunch of death. You haven't seen anything really magical yet. Now, this is the big magical thing that happens. She walks into a fire, her clothes burn off, but she is unburnt. She is the unburnt.
Yes. All right, and then Steven, you want to take us to the ending of Ned there? How Ned's story kind of wraps up with season 1?
all right,
So
Steven.
I'll start with a aside on this one. I actually had read this in the books, and I knew Amanda was getting to this in the books one day when she was going to work. And so I tell her, she says, "Oh yeah, no, so this has just happened." And basically, as Tyler said, Ned has been taken into prison because he's been plotting against the new king Joffrey,
Air quotes.
quote unquote. Yeah,
He's
I have big
technically
air
not
quotes
wrong.
around that. I mean, for the good of the kingdom. Anyways, so this is what's happening in the books, and Amanda tells me, "Oh, this is what's happening in the books," and I go, put my hand on her shoulder, Amanda, I'll be there for you when you finish this chapter. You just remember that. And she's like, "All right, you weirdo." Goes off to work. I come to pick her up at the end of the day because we only had one car at the point, and she opens the door and yells, "You motherfucker!" Just screams at me, "How could you let this blah, blah, blah?" So what happens is Ned is taken prisoner, put into a dungeon, and from Ned's point of view, he's stuck in that dungeon and just continuously there. He is. I believe, I don't remember who gives who the option of being sent to the Night's Watch. I think it might be him that's
Varys.
told you can give up. Huh?
Varys comes to visit.
Yeah, and says you can give up all your position and become part of the Night's Watch, and eventually he accepts that, and so it's time for him to be sent out to the Night's Watch, which is really nice and cute and all. And someone brings him out, and Joffrey and his Gary's magnanimous Joffrey is standing at the ceremony going, "I am a just and kind king, and I am here for you, my people, and kill the dude." And not exactly that, but basically exactly
The
that.
hearts of babes, like, or something like
What?
that. Like, basically, his mother and Sansa both want leniency and like let him live out his days at the Wall. Like, let's
Everyone
just
wants leniency,
sweep him
except
away,
for Joffrey.
dishonor, like, so that no one would ever trust anything he says. Like, sweep him under the rug and walk away.
But Gary's boy Joffrey here has other ideas. Joffrey just wants his head. And so he has Sir Ilan, is it Ilan Payne? None?
Ilan Payne.
William Payne.
Sir Ilan Payne, the man without a tongue, decapitate Ned Stark. Just take him out. And Ned Stark, up to this point in the series, has been the pivotal character that everything has kind of revolved around. And you're sitting there going, this can't be real. There's no way that's real. This didn't just happen. It is a surreal moment of no way. At this point in time, Arya, who has been working with a sword master, is actually in the crowd because she thinks her dad's going to be released. What?
Syrio Farrell, the first sword.
Syrio Farrell, yes. What do we say to the god of death? Not today. So she's sitting in the crowd going, all right, he's going to be released. And it doesn't happen. And she's just freaking out. And suddenly a hand gets put on her shoulder and goes, come with me. And she's taken away. And I believe that might be the end of that episode.
Mm-hmm.
I think it just ends there with her being taken and Ned's head rolling pretty little circles on the ground.
Also, as a reflection of the first episode, where Ned uses his ancestral family sword, Ice, to decapitate a wildling, Ned is killed by his ancestral sword, Ice.
Yep, that is right.
And then Gary's boy Joffrey puts Ned's head up on the spike there and makes Sansa stand there and look at it.
Bush, supposedly.
Until this point in the book, I thought I understood. This is the good boy, the good guy. This is the bad guy. Everything's clear. And then I don't believe exactly what Steven said were the words I used, but there was definitely yelling involved. I felt betrayed.
The story I always like to allude to I think it was one of my friends said that they accidentally looked at IMDb and looked at the actor who plays Ned Stark. And this was maybe like season 3 it progressed. Like, oh, this guy's only been in like 6 episodes. That's weird.
Did they replace Sean Bean? There's no way they could replace Sean Bean. Sean Bean, oh.
You look at a series on IMDb, it's usually based on best known actor or the number of episodes they've been in. And I don't think like by season 3 Sean Bean's even a top billed actor anymore.
He's done after season 1.
Yeah, he's just he died. And then I had to sit there and be like, so is he coming back? Because I've been spoiled into this point. Like, oh, he's not really dead,
they'll bring him back. Yeah.
Yeah. And Steven's face told me everything I wanted to know. There might have been some more yelling. I am sorry, Steven.
Healing. Bringing people together here, this show and this discussion here. And then I'll just kind of maybe touch on the other character we've talked about a little bit more of, Jon. So he's up north of the Wall, basically working with his brothers. He was kind of told by Tyrion, like, hey, these people aren't what you think they are. This order isn't what you think they are. So Jon kind of starts to realize that, you know, if he wants the Night's Watch to kind of be better, he has to start using his knowledge he learned while he was being trained in the castle, basically to help train the other members of the Night's Watch. And then
there's a really nice moment there where he goes in and he's like, why does everyone hate me so much? They're all such pricks and blah, blah, blah. And I don't remember exactly who takes him aside, but someone just take... What?
I think it's Tyrion who takes him aside.
It's Tyrion.
Is it Tyrion that takes him aside?
Yes.
Oh, okay. And says, you're a lordling. You've learned how to do the sword stuff your entire life. They've never held a sword before in their lives. Maybe if you help them... And it's a really kind of inspirational, nice little moment of, you're good at something, help out other people at it. They might respect you unless you don't, like, lord it over them.
Yeah, because Jon says, oh, I'm better than them. And he's like, well, of course you are. Been studying it all your life. Feel better now?
Then also, too, another character we haven't talked about, and Gary will know this guy quite well, Mr. Alistair Thorne. Every time he shows up on screen, I was just like, fuck Alistair Thorne, because he's an asshole. But then basically, Alistair Thorne's the guy in the Night's Watch, basically, who's like, technically, like, I think second in command, really, there. He's just a jerk to basically, like, everyone.
Oh, yeah.
I remember him.
Then John starts.
He trains the new ones.
Yes, that's what he does too there at the wall. Then John kind of forms a bond there with Sam Tarley, that one of the newer members of the Night's Watch there, because he kind of takes pity on Sam because Sam is this guy who is just not a fighter whatsoever. You get some interactions between Sam and Maester Aemon, where sorry, not Sam, but John, where John kind of learns a little bit more, I believe, about Maester Aemon there. Pretty for sure that's these episodes here. He also then stops that white that is brought through, basically, that was trying to kill Jeor Mormont, which we learn is Jorah Mormont's dad, who is the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch. John stops this white from killing the Lord Commander, and then John gets his own Valyrian steel sword, Longclaw.
And the pommel is originally a bear because the sigil of the Mormonts is a bear,
Yep.
whereas the sigil for the
Starks is a wolf.
is a wolf. So he says, like, it could be just as well a bear or a wolf.
And also, too, you get in one of the conversations John has with Maester Aemon, you learn that he was actually Aemon Targaryen, who had a chance at some point in time to take over the throne, but he refused it because he was a maester, which they're kind of like the Night's Watch. They're not really supposed to take sides in the political happenings of Westeros.
Mm-hmm.
And then it kind of ends there for John's part of the show there, with John basically riding with the Night's Watch, basically going north of the wall. They're ranging north of the wall to figure out what is going on up there. There's reports of White Walkers and wildlings are starting to mass everywhere, trying to maybe escape whatever's going on up north there.
One thing we did not mention as we were going through this, sorry, real quick, was that actually in Winterfell, they do have a run-in with a couple wildlings. Osha is actually... Ocean, what?
Asha.
Asha, whatever her name is. Her and a couple other wildlings come and attack Bran, I believe, and are captured. I think two of them are killed and one of them is captured, I believe. I don't remember exactly. But it's just showing that there are a lot of these free folk coming over the borders back into the lower countries, and no one's really sure why.
I think she even mentions too, like she says there's like something going on up north there that's very bad or whatever. They're trying to basically flee south to escape whatever's coming. Gary, I guess kind of just throwing it back over to you then. Is there anything kind of to further touch on before we kind of wrap up the episode?
I was going to do the total character count and where they're at from episode 1 on IMDb, the cast list, and who's survived.
Okay.
So on IMDb, and it's in the order of credit order. So on the first episode, how they were listed in the credits: Eddard Ned Stark, dead. Robert Baratheon, dead. Jaime Lannister, alive in King's Landing. Catelyn Stark, alive and in Winterfell. No,
she's in the Eyrie, I believe.
Eyrie.
Yes, that's the Eyrie. No, I think at the end of the season, doesn't she meet Robb not at Winterfell, but somewhere in the...
Oh, yeah, you're right. She does, because that's when Robb finds out about his father's death, too. He meets him somewhere in between Winterfell and the Eyrie.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, still alive. Cersei Lannister in King's Landing. Daenerys Targaryen in King's Landing.
No.
Jorah Mormont.
No.
Daenerys is...
Sorry, Daenerys is in the
waste.
The
waste.
desert.
The desert. Jorah Mormont is in the desert. Viserys Targaryen, dead. Jon Snow at the wall. Sansa Stark in King's Landing. Arya Stark in King's Landing. Robb Stark somewhere in the middle of the country.
Being named King of the North.
Yeah, King of the North. Theon Greyjoy, I can't remember at this point, is he still with Rob or is he...
He is still with Rob
Yeah.
at this point there. I think he's one of the first people to stand up and say King of the North.
Yep.
Stark is still in Winterfell.
Who?
Joffrey Baratheon would be in King's Landing.
Did we lose him?
I can't tell sometimes if we lose Gary or... Oh, yeah, we lost him.
Oh,
we
we
lost
actually
him.
lost him.
Oh. We'll give him a bit to rejoin there. But yeah, like I think he said Brandon Stark is in Winterfell.
Okay.
All right.
Am I back?
You back?
You're back now. Gary.
Yeah.
Sorry. Technical difficulties.
You were at Joffrey Baratheon.
Joffrey, wow, I missed a lot. Sandor the Hound Clegane is in King's Landing. Tyrion Lannister would be somewhere in the middle, not quite to King's Landing.
Correct. He's wherever his father was. Basically, he just left his father.
So where is that? Maester Luwin would still be in King's Landing.
Nope, Winterfell. Maester Luwin's the Maester of
Yeah,
Winterfell.
sorry, Winterfell. Wow, my pictures just so totally went weird. Jory, the guy Jory's Cassell. So the guy who gets killed at the brothel, like Ned Stark's buddy.
He's killed at the brothel.
Yeah. Roderick Cassell is with Catelyn somewhere meeting up with Rob.
Yep.
Benjen Stark is at the wall and presumed dead.
He's somewhere
He's
north.
MIA.
Yeah, somewhere
Someone
north of the wall.
Presumed dead.
How many more you got?
Irio
We had a
Matabas. Irio, the traitor in the Waste who
Pentos.
Pentos, yes.
Lario.
Quatho, which is one of the Blood Riders, dead, because he's the one who dies fighting what's his name?
Khal Drogo.
Khal Drogo. Ross, the whore from Winterfell, is now in King's Landing. Septa Mordain,
Oh,
so the
yeah.
scepter of the girls in King's Landing, dead. John Aaron, dead.
very much.
Will, who is the wildling who dies, gets beheaded, dead.
Dead.
And then it's like 3 in a row of the 3 characters who die in the opening. So the 3
Members of the Night's Watch.
actually it's 2 more. So the 2 members of the Night's Watch. Then Tommen Baratheon, Marcella Baratheon are in King's Landing. Hodor is in Winterfell. And then it just kind of goes into some random people. And then Khal Drogo, dead. So, based on my very unscientific finger game, 11 people that were shown in the first episode are dead by the end of season 1.
I did want to point out that you were wrong on one of those people, and we missed a big event. During episode 9, Rob comes out with his army, uses a diversion, sacrifices a bunch of soldiers, and captures Jaime Lannister.
Yeah.
So Jaime Lannister is not in King's Landing. He is currently captured.
Yes, that's right. At the Battle of the Whispering Woods, I think that's called in the books.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
It was like the
Sounds like a
first
name.
major
Right.
victory Robb Stark had against the Southern Lords or whatever it was.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, good catch there.
That was my review of, like, as I was looking at episode 1, I'm like, hey, who's in this? I was like, wow, shitload of these people don't make it through season 1.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, as we kind of wind down here, anything else we want to kind of touch on? Are we good to kind of wrap it up here?
I think we are good to wrap it up. I think we hit a bunch of stuff.
Yes. Anything from you, Amanda?
I agree. I'm trying to think of anything, but I can't.
Gary, anything else you want to touch on?
Excited for season 2.
Excited for season 2. All right, so to kind of flow into that, the way we'll kind of work this is, I think we'll try to keep it small to make it easier for us and others who will be joining us probably for this podcast at a later point in time to kind of keep up with watching the episodes during some of our busy schedules here. So for next time, we're going to try and watch season 2, episodes 1 and 2, and I think I have their names written down. The North Remembers is episode 1. And then for episode 2, it's called The Nightlands. So we'll try to have those watched for next time by the time we come back to this. All right, any final closing thoughts from anyone? Take the silence as a no. All right, thanks anyone for listening. Hope you all have a good one.
Bye.